Hello, everyone. I'm Blair Michael, and I'm the partner advocate at Better Earth. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into all things compostable packaging and composting. More specifically, we're going to be covering the current packaging landscape in our country, how compostables can be a catalyst for a circular economy, composting, some consumer and legislative as well as market momentum. And then at the end, we'll go over some key takeaways and resources for you guys to use in the future. And then, of course, have plenty of time for Q&A. So without further ado, let's dive in. Better Earth is a sustainable packaging provider from Atlanta, Georgia, and we're on a mission to make sustainability accessible and regenerative circularity achievable. We have a full catalog of 100% compostable packaging. We provide sustainable packaging to restaurants, hotels, hospitals, schools, and other food service establishments across our country and other parts of the globe. At Better Earth, we envision a world powered by a regenerative circular economy where nothing is wasted and value is created at every step of the value chain. However, we still largely operate in a linear world where we make, take, and waste a lot of stuff. And the food service industry's impact has been substantial. Roughly 1/3 of all US food is wasted, and food service packaging makes up roughly 1/3 of all US municipal solid waste. And the true cost of the linear economy is really inestimable. And that's because plastics are designed to never go away. Instead, they break down into smaller and smaller pieces that persist in our environment. And petroleum-based plastics pollute at every step of their life cycle. Plastics are poisoning our food chain and therefore us. Studies show that we are now consuming, on average, a credit card's weight worth of microplastics a week. That's pretty scary. But why are all these plastics still so prevalent? Well, for one, recycling isn't working. Of the 30 million tons of plastics that we create in America each year, less than 5% gets recycled. And globally, only 9% of all plastics ever created have been recycled. And that's because most plastics can't be recycled in the first place. Only number 1 and 2 plastics in that chasing arrow are considered universally recyclable. And even then, plastics can only be recycled for a couple of times before they completely lose any value. And the recycling symbol is unregulated. This means anyone can use the recycling symbol, whether it can or cannot be recycled, which leads to contamination and further ramps up the cost to recycle in the first place. And recycling infrastructure is shuttering. This has been accelerating after China said no to Western waste in 2018 due to contamination. But what if packaging could perform and replenish? While single-use plastics are synonymous with a linear economy, compostable packaging represents a clear circular solution. Our compostable packaging is made from renewable, regenerative crops that naturally sequester carbon and enrich soil. Designed to disappear, our packaging breaks down into nutrient-rich compost, revitalizing the land to help grow more nutrient-dense crops. And here are just a few more ways that compostables serve as a catalyst for our health, economy, and environment. Expanded polystyrene, or as most of us know it as styrofoam, is now a known carcinogen by the World Health Organization. Compostable packaging, on the other hand, requires rigorous third-party testing to ensure that there's no toxicity left behind in the soil during the composting process, or therefore in us. One chain customer was able to reduce 3.6 million styrofoam clamshells from our landfills and environment in just 6 months by switching to sustainable packaging. And compostables create green jobs. At Better Earth alone, we're supporting over 150 green jobs in the Southeast, including more than 60 Tennessee farmers that grow the crops for our regenerative farmers fiber collection. Compostables are ag-based products made from renewable resources like bamboo, sugarcane, and switchgrass, and they're grown by real farmers like Shane. In regenerative food systems, every partner supports every other partner across the value chain. For us, it starts with the farmers and the fields where our raw materials are grown, to the packaging enjoyed by our customers, back to the fields that composters serve. Each partner is critical to the overall success of our shared mission. With our compost partners, for example, all of our packaging is designed with composters in mind. From there, compostable packaging helps capture more food scraps for composters. And the packaging itself serves as an important carbon source for composters. And compostables help create more demand for growing composting infrastructure. Third-party certifications like ASTM, BPI, and CMA help ensure that compostable packaging will break down in a commercial composting facility. ASTM is the foundational commercial composting certification. The first one, D6400, is for fiber-based products. The second, D6868, is for bioplastics or bioplastic-lined fiber and paperboard. Third-party certifications go a step beyond and incorporate fluorine testing for PFAS. Be assured that BPI and CMA certified compostable packaging always means that it's PFAS-free, just like how being certified organic automatically means that it's also non-GMO. BPI certified compostables, which are certified by the organization Biodegradable Products Institute, are lab tested. BPI is the leading third-party certifier of compostable packaging. You can find all of Better Earth's BPI certified products on the Better Earth profile on BPI's website. CMA, Composter Manufacturing Alliance certified compostables are field tested in compost piles. CMA's goal is to bridge the gap between composters and compostable packaging. You can also find all of Better Earth's CMA certified compostable packaging on CMA's website. And unlike plastics, compostables don't break down into tiny pieces that end up in our environment and bodies. When composted, they break down into something of value, a nutrient-rich soil amendment. Unfortunately, our soil is in a dire state. Rapid development and modern agriculture practices like excessive tillage and monocropping have skyrocketed to keep up with our linear economy. And it stripped the land of its nutrients, affecting the health of our ecosystem and ourselves. Right now, roughly half of US agriculture lands have degraded soils. And while we have a lot to lose from depleting our soils, we have that much more to gain from protecting it, including carbon sequestration, water retention, erosion control, drought mitigation, less chemical inputs, more nutrient-dense foods, and so much more. So what is composting? Composting is the process of breaking down organic materials, such as food and yard waste, into a nutrient-rich soil amendment. Composting is one of the most turnkey and timeless solutions for replenishing our soils. So how do we compost? Composting is simulating natural cycles and seasons. So take a tree, for example. Fruit falls off the tree in the summer and begins to break down. The dry leaves then fall off in the fall. Animals come and root around below the tree, looking for food and mixing up the leaves and fruit. Rain then comes throughout the year, and nutrients seep down into the roots and soil, growing an even better harvest of fruit the next season. We're simply just trying to recreate that same circular system in a compost pile. We start with 1 part nitrogen materials, Think anything like your fresh, lively, green items, like food waste, food scraps, and your fresh yard waste. We then add 2 parts carbon, which are dry, typically brown materials like dry leaves, hay, straw, sticks, cardboard, even paper towels. We then add enough water to ensure the pile is damp. We don't want it to be soaking wet or sitting in standing water. Then you want to turn that pile regularly, usually about once a week, to add in oxygen. Oxygen is what makes a compost pile different than a landfill. Composting is an aerobic process, and that oxygen allows microbes to thrive. Backyard piles that typically consist of a family's food scraps are smaller, less hot, and more versatile and variable. For example, a family of 4 will create more food scraps than, let's say, one person composting in a smaller apartment balcony bin. One family may eat out more or may eat less vegetables and just generally create less food scraps. Another family may water or turn their pile more regularly than their neighbors. Whereas in a commercial composting facility, you're gathering a whole community's worth of food scraps. So you're able to create much larger, hotter, and microbially active compost piles. At its core temperature, a commercial scale composting pile can reach 155 degrees Fahrenheit. This means you can break down compostables much faster and break down harder to break down items like meat, bones, dairy, grease, and some compostable packaging. Commercial composting facilities follow certain operational procedures to ensure consistent, certifiable quality compost. So there are 3 main types of commercial composting facilities: windrow, aerated static pile, or most commonly referred to as ASP, and covered in vessel. So with windrow, you're going to have really long rows. They can be as long as a football field long that are manually or mechanically turned by tractors or by windrow machines that drive over the top of the windrow pile and turn it below. Windrows typically take about 90 to 180 days to compost, and they require large equipment and staff to manually operate and turn these piles. Aerated static piles are a layer of greens and browns that are placed over pipes that aerate the pile from below. So they pump oxygen up from below into the pile rather than turning the piles. These pipes are often on time or temperature sensors. ASP piles compost quickly in as little as a couple of weeks. They require cost and technical assistance to install and maintain the pipes, sensors, and blowers. Then we also have our covered in vessel. So in covered in vessels, organics are put into a drum or silo or similar closed space. The size of the vessel really varies depending on the volumes of compostables. One of the benefits to closed environments allow for more controlled environments. So covered in vessels are popular in cold climates or in areas where there's less land or, where you really need to mitigate, potential odor risk. So once again, just really create that controlled environment. And according to the Institute for Self-Reliance State of Composting in the US report, which is a very fascinating report, there were 4,194 composting facilities in the US in 2018, but only 185 of those accept food waste. The EPA did estimate that in 2018, Americans composted 25 million tons, which is a great start. However, there is room to increase volumes composted and diverted from landfills and emphasize food scrap collection to increase nutrient cycling. It's important as composting scales to keep the composting conversation rooted in soil health and not simply waste diversion. So while compostable packaging is one tool to support composting, there is definitely more that needs to be done. The investment to start a composting facility is expensive. You need land, big equipment, consultants and technical assistants, permits, hauling equipment and software, or a third party hauling partner, and more. We need significant federal funding, especially with the White House's recent goal to increase bioplastic production. We need their support to grow infrastructure to handle that increase in material. We also need funding to be accessible to composters of all sizes. Another hurdle has been the lack of cohesion with composting program rollouts across the country. Different items that can be collected, different bin color, and different signage all creates confusion. And then contamination. Contamination is the most common constraint to composters. Contamination ranging from something as small as microplastics and produce stickers to as big as TVs and toilets. Contamination is costly, dangerous, and degrades the quality of compost. Expensive sifting equipment, landfill cost, and extra staff all add up. When a composter has a certain amount of contamination in their pile, it's not worth hand sorting out. Now they're out hauling cost, landfill cost, and potential in-market sales. Even something as small as one shattered glass bottle can jeopardize a whole load. Whether it be chemicals that they cannot properly handle or that shattered glass or sharp metal, contamination is dangerous to compost workers. And contamination creates lesser quality compost, reducing the potential cost for their compost and consumers' perception of compost. This jeopardizes the end market for compost industry wide. But one way that we can help address food service packaging contamination is clear, standardized labeling on compostable packaging. However, non-compostable packaging competitors have increasingly began to make lookalikes. Greenwashing comes in all forms, from coloring and tinting, misleading words like biodegradable, to the little leaf symbol. And from 10 feet up in a tractor, when turning a compost pile, it can be really hard to discern greenwashing. So it's important to follow standardized labeling guidelines on compostable packaging that are clear for both composters and consumers. And another important aspect of addressing contamination to scale composting correctly is that public education piece. We need more public awareness about the benefits of composting, how to compost, and that their compost goes to farmers to grow more food for them. This will help engage the community in creating good quality compost. We also need food service establishments to commit to 100% compostable packaging to help ensure that they're reducing any potential plastic contamination in their compost bins. Composting in our school systems is a great way to create a foundational understanding of composting for the next generation and is a great example of a closed loop environment and system. So clear, consistent bin color, signage, and labeling can help students, food service staff, and consumers ensure that they're composting correctly. While these solutions aren't simple and aren't the complete answer to growing composting infrastructure, they can help us create successful composting programs as we scale. But the good news, there's a lot of momentum for composting and regenerative circularity right now. So there's been bipartisan federal momentum in legislation. The Compost Act and the Recycling and Composting Accountability Act, or RCAA, have both garnered a lot of momentum in Congress. And some efforts to support composting were actually included in the 2018 Farm Bill. And advocates are pushing to expand those current programs and to add in the Compost Act in the 2023 Farm Bill. 8 states have composting and food waste laws, and cities like Seattle, Austin, Portland, Boulder, Denver, New York City, San Francisco, and more are launching or even mandating municipal composting programs. There's also been a lot of legislation pointing towards a plastic-free future that'll promote sustainable packaging. 8 states have banned single-use plastic bags. Another 8 states have banned expanded polystyrene. And 5 states have enacted extended producer responsibility legislation. EPR bills hold manufacturers accountable for end of life for the products that they create. Through these EPR bills, manufacturers pay fees to create waste management infrastructure for their products. Traditionally, EPR bills focused on recycling, but 2 recent EPR bills included composters sitting on the EPR advisory board and included funding for composting infrastructure. We're seeing more and more EPR bills in the pipeline, and we're hoping that those future EPR bills really follow those 2 more recent EPR bills in Colorado and California, including composting in the conversation. And 11 states have banned PFAS in packaging. California, Colorado, Connecticut, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington, and Hawaii. And as a reminder, all BPI certified and CMA certified compostable products are PFAS free. So that standardized labeling makes it very easy to spot PFAS free compostable packaging. However, currently 10 US states have passed preemptive laws making it impossible for cities in these states to pass single-use plastic bans. 17 states total have some sort of restriction that prevents future plastic bans. Essentially, they're a ban on bans, as reported by the National Geographic last year. In other words, a third of the US has laws that allow our plastic problem to persist. But as mentioned, we are seeing legislative momentum that's pointing us towards that plastic-free future. And we're also seeing consumer momentum. 77% of Americans agree that companies need to stop producing single-use plastic. And that's echoed worldwide. 3 in 4 people globally want single-use plastics to be banned as soon as possible. And 73% of consumers say that they are willing to pay more for sustainable packaging. And that number actually rises to 83% among younger buyers. The industry is growing and growing fast. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation says that the circular economy represents a multi-trillion-dollar economic opportunity. So we're seeing our politicians and consumers and people within our industry and the broader circular economy really pushing for compostables, packaging, and composting. So to recap, compostable is a legally binding term. That means that any product using this term for marketing purposes must be certified to break down in a commercial composting facility in 90 to 180 days and leave no toxicity behind in the soil. Regenerative raw materials sequester carbon and help build healthy soils. Commercial composting facilities use science and precise procedures to provide the ideal conditions for composting a wide variety of materials quickly and efficiently. Whereas backyard composting piles are less consistent, so cannot guarantee the time it would take compostable packaging to break down from one pile compared to another person's pile. And the circular economy is a system where nothing is wasted and contributes to other aspects of the value chain. From field to fork to field, we're closing the loop at Better Earth. And why should you help close the loop? As mentioned, in a closed loop system, nothing is wasted. Every partner and resource adds value to every other partner throughout the system. We boost our economy and create more local green jobs. Healthy soil equals healthy food, which equals healthy people. And we're able to solve social, health, and economic issues while simultaneously addressing today's mounting environmental crises. So how can you continue to learn more about compostable packaging, composting, and the circular economy? You can find the composter map that we shared earlier on in the presentation on the Sustainable Packaging Coalition's website. And you can find hundreds of composting resources on the U.S. Composting Council and Institute for Self-Reliance websites. Those are both great resources for composting information. LandCorp is a great website to stay up to date on composting and regenerative agriculture legislation. They have really easy tools where you can advocate for yourself. And then Regenerate America is another website where you can help advocate for regenerative agriculture, composting, and soil health in the upcoming 2023 Farm Bill. And if you happen to be local to Georgia, please sign Root Local's petition to advocate for food waste regulations, food recovery, and the growth of composting infrastructure in our home state. And if you'd like to learn more about compostable packaging specifically, you can find certified compostable packaging on BPI and CMA's websites. On their websites, you can also find various resources on compostable packaging, field testing, composting, and legislation. And then lastly, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a great resource for building a circular economy. And Better Earth would love to be a resource for you and our industry. So you can find more information on all the topics above and more on our blog, YouTube channel, and knowledge base. And please feel free to let me know if you're interested in any specific topics, and I'd be happy to send you more information and elaborate further on those. I love talking all things compost and compostable packaging. I'll be sure to share these resources and my contact information in the chat. But now we'll go ahead and open things up for Q&A. So if you give us just 1 minute, we're going to go ahead and give all of you guys microphone capabilities so that you can come off mute and ask those questions. You can also type in any questions that you may have in the chat, and we'll have team members read those out for everyone, and we'll be sure to answer them. So feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat or come off mute in just 1 second. All right, you should be able to come off mute now. Let's see if we have any questions in the chat. Looks like we had Gary ask, is Better Earth recyclable? So all of our products are made from plants, which is great. So made from those items, like I mentioned before, bamboo, sugarcane, switchgrass, corn, and things like that. So those are all compostable. We do have FSC paperboard. So it's Forest Stewardship Council certified paperboard made from responsibly managed forest. Those specific collections are able to be recycled since they are made from that paperboard. And paper is an item that we need more and more of recycled. It's very valuable. So definitely feel free to compost or recycle our FSC paperboard collections. That includes our food containers, our hot cups. And so I believe those are the 2 collections. Other questions from anyone out there, either in the chat or if you want to come off mute, and feel free to ask away or just continue the conversation. If any any areas really stood out to you and you want us to elaborate further, or if you want to just start a dialogue around any of those areas that interest you and that we need to be having these conversations, together about, feel free to join in there as well.
Hi, Blair. It's Rob.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, hey, just so everyone knows, a lot of the objections I've gotten or received over the years is the hauling component when restaurant operators say, Rob, who's going to pick up my food waste and take it to the compost for me? So, um, with that said, what kind of legislation, if any, is being worked on with some of the national haulers to get together and come up with a plan, logistical plan to get the food waste from the restaurants, which of course would be an additional cost should that onus be put on an operator for the future?
Yeah, so in terms of the waste hauling industry, I'm actually not sure of any projects that they're working on either together or with legislators to create that more streamlined, kind of hauling infrastructure. As mentioned, they are looking to add the Compost Act into the 2023 Farm Bill. And we're looking at RCAA, the Recycling and Composting Accountability Act. So, what the RCAA would do is it would actually collect data to really see, what our current composting infrastructure landscape is in our country and where the gaps are. Because as you saw in this presentation, most of the data out there is from 2018. And so we really need up-to-date data and to identify where those gaps are, and then from there create that infrastructure build-out plan and hauling plan. So I think the first step is to really, identify and understand, the current landscape right now. That SPC map is really one of the most comprehensive snapshots that I've seen across the country of composters and what materials they accept. But definitely do know that more waste haulers are looking to add on composting components and contracts. I know that locally here in Atlanta, an organization, Rubicon, they also work to help create some of these, partnerships with waste haulers to collect compostable materials and help build out that really streamlined hauling infrastructure. So hopefully more to come after we see more movement, with the Farm Bill. But that's a great thing that you brought up and something that I can really, keep my ear to the ground on, especially at Compost 2024 next year, which is the U.S. Composting Council's annual composting conference.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Blair, thank you so much. This is Brandy Townsend. I used to live in Atlanta, and now I'm up in Rome, Georgia, and I am actively trying to get an in-vessel composting uh, facility up here because it pairs well with the ag sod chicken farms up here. As you said, the soil amendment is great for feeding our sod farms and spraying it back on there. Uh, I really, some of our local, to Rob's comment about hauling, some of our local guys line their dumpsters and just bring it up to Guar, which is probably our largest composter here and outside of Atlanta. I think the biggest um, barrier to sort of overcome is where to take it. Just because we don't have enough processors around major metropolitans for the food waste, like you said, Blair. Like this Emory University is asking, where can we put it? And they're permitting their space to put a in-vessel composter is so small that we just need more opportunities with logistics and processors. So thank you for the presentation, and I'm excited to sort of work with you. I had one other question about your hot beverages. I see on your website, is the actual lid to the compostable hot beverage cup compostable as well?
Yes. So everything we do is 100% compostable. So
Cool.
that's a PLA.
Okay.
So made from things like corn and sugar beets. So, and that's actually CPLA, crystallized PLA, so that it can reach those higher temperatures for things like, coffees and teas. But yeah, to y'all's points around, hauling and infrastructure, especially here in Georgia. We just don't have right now adequate, infrastructure to handle the volumes. I heard David Paul from Compost Now here in Atlanta share recently shared, a statistic that we would actually need 10 commercial composting facilities just to service the Atlanta market for food scraps. So that's literally just the Atlanta market alone. But I do know that they are in the process of creating the Georgia Composting Council State Chapter, GACC. And so hopefully once we have that kind of convening body around composting, we'll begin to see more momentum around legislation, permitting, and things like that and funding to make composting infrastructure more accessible in our state. I know Root Local's also working on that, Drawdown Georgia's Food and Ag Committee. So there's a lot of different folks who see the need, and we're feeling this momentum, coming. And so I'm really excited for GACC to hopefully be able to really funnel a lot of that into one place. In the meantime, Better Earth is doing all that we can to advocate for composting in our state. We've invested in composting infrastructure, and we've also gone to speak with different state senators about the importance of composting and how, as an ag state, how food scraps can help us address, kind of two different things. It can help us divert from landfills, which we have limited space, and it can be, one of our best resources for our ag industry as an ag state. So we've been working, as hard as we can, in the Capitol to spread the good word as well. So, Brandy, I'm so excited to hear about what you're working on in Rome. I'm from North Georgia, so definitely understand. For those of you who don't know, we're the chicken capital of the world. And so huge opportunity there in the North Georgia region. So
I'll be in
looking forward to
touch.
staying tuned on your in-vessel project.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. This has been wonderful.
Yeah. Any other questions or just inputs on the conversation? No, doesn't seem like it. Not right now. Okay, well, what I'll do is I will work on dropping those resources in the chat here in a minute, but you're also going to get a follow-up email where we'll include the resources as well. And all of our webinars are housed on Better Earth's YouTube channel. So you can rewatch this one, watch any parts that you may have missed, share with colleagues or anyone else interested in compostable packaging and composting, and check out any of our past or future webinars as well. So thank you guys so much for your time this afternoon and for your interest in compostable packaging, composting, and closing the loop. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.